Say all those joyful things.
Hello, welcome to Keeping the Beat, an engaging web series hosted live by TNMEA in partnership with the CMA Foundation. Tune in weeknights, Monday through Thursday at 7 p.m. Central Time to learn from and interact with music professionals from around the globe representing every facet of the vast world of music. Today is Thursday, April 23rd. My name is Glen Kotche, and I'm a drummer and composer based in Chicago, and I'm the longtime drummer of the rock band Wilco. Tonight, I'll be talking to you about the what if question, how asking questions fuels discovery. I encourage you to interact by replying to this video stream with your questions and comments, which I'll respond to throughout the hour with the assistance of the talented, brilliant, and beautiful Dr. Midi Kotche. One disclaimer, while this is being streamed live, it will remain on the Keeping the Beat Facebook page for future reference, so as such, your comments will also remain a part of the archive, so be nice. Okay, so I'm here to talk to you about the creative process and my experiences and how the simple act of asking questions has fueled discovery for me and in turn has created interesting opportunities that have shaped my musical life and experiences. I wanted to talk about this because most of my work has originated by asking what if, or asking how can I translate this to what I do, or I wonder if I can do that on drums. So I hope that tonight I can offer some of you some sort of practical advice or useful examples so that you can apply this idea to your own creative pursuits if you don't already. The practice of asking questions is steeped in curiosity. I get this probably from some combination of my parents, my family and siblings, and my teachers throughout the years. But I think also from my musical friends, and in particular, my longtime musical cohort and one of my great musical inspirations, Jim O'Rourke. He may have gotten this from John Cage, I'm guessing, but hearing that from Jim so many times after he would finish an incredible record, he'd put out an amazing record that would be completely different from his previous amazing record. And I'd ask him, like, how did you get the idea to do that? And his reply would inevitably be, I'm just asking questions. So I think those interactions probably made it really stick with me, or at least made me more aware of that act, even if it already was a big part of how I was operating. So I'm constantly asking myself, how would I do that in my medium, which is drum kit? And it continually sparks ideas. That's probably why I've gotten so much inspiration from visual art, for example. One of my favorite things to do on tour with Wilco is to visit the local art museum. And by seeing all these disparate techniques and ideas that visual artists use, I then oftentimes ponder about transferring them to what I do. Okay, I'm going to get touch more on that in a bit, but let me back up first and start from the beginning. So I never really talk about this much, but I was thinking about this talk the other day, and I realized that when I was young, there were three lucky accidents or circumstances that I believe helped shape or determine what I do and how I do it now in a profound way. So the first of these would probably be breaking my leg. When I was in second grade, I broke my leg. I was really into sports before that. Loved field day at school, was super fast and just really active and loved sports. And then second grade at Spring Hill School in Roselle, Illinois, I was playing tackle football at recess, and someone caught up with me, and I landed just the wrong way and broke my femur bone, which put me out of commission for a little while. I was in traction in the hospital for 6 weeks, and then a body cast for 3 months up to here. And then after that, I was in a walker and crutches. I think I only made it to a month or two of school that school year. And it basically, put me out of commission. And because of that, I was at home a lot on my own. My father had 2 jobs. My mother worked as well, so I had a lot of me time. I, had a tutor, of course, but I think that time away from all my classmates and play dates, and I didn't get to hang out with my friends or play in the snow or any of that stuff. It really fostered my imagination and creativity. That combined with also not being active for that year and it taking a long time for me to fully recover. I mean, I remember I couldn't even fully bend my leg for quite some time. But I think that kind of pushed me away from sports at that point too. I was just a bit behind and a lot more apprehensive when it came to physical activity from then on, and so that's why when joining the band program at school became an option, I went full in. So breaking my leg would be the first kind of happy accident. The second was a budget shortfall in the school district at that point. And I say this because typically at my school in those years, you would start the band program in 4th grade. There was some sort of budget shortfall, and they were making cuts, and music teacher got cut, of course, and so the band director then had to switch to not just doing band, but also teaching classroom music. So he wasn't able to start that introductory 4th grade class. So everyone my year had to wait an extra year to start band because there wasn't the money and resources for us to do that. Much to my parents' credit, they signed me up for drum lessons anyway at the local music store at Roselle Music in Roselle, Illinois. And I got kind of a year of practicing of playing, learning technique, and learning how to drum before all of my classmates my same age. So by the time the school band program did start, I already had a year's experience and I was ready to go. Before that, my only teacher was really my father on organ, and so having those lessons really gave me an upper hand. And since I was better than the rest of my classmates at that point, then that was really inspirational for me. It was a big confidence builder. And by the end of that first year of band, I ended up skipping 2 bands ahead into the concert band and was in the jazz band, much to my band director's credit. And that was really a confidence builder for me and a way for me to kind of define myself. So even though I'd always kind of identified as a drummer, since I was a little kid, a toddler, basically, I always thought I was a drummer, but I never really had the experience to be an actual drummer. And by the end of that 5th grade year, I felt like that's really who I was, and I had the confidence to back that up. And being the youngest of 6 kids as well, it was nice to differentiate myself and have something that set me apart as well. I always say if there was one thing you could go back and tell a younger self, it would be to have more confidence, to not worry about what other people think so much. And, that first year of band for me really did give me that confidence and really helped me get through school and, that awkward time that we all go through in those tween and teen years. So that was the second thing, breaking my leg, the budget shortfall at school. And the third thing I would have to say would be just being very lucky to get a lot of really great teachers, music teachers in particular. I said that started with my father, who also taught piano and organ. So he taught me organ when I was really young, 6, 7, 8 years old. And that definitely fostered a love of coordination for me because he was teaching me to do, switching with my left foot between 2 pedals while my left hand was playing in between them, chords, and then playing melody on my right hand. And that 3-way coordination just fostered a love of being able to unlock these internal body puzzles almost. And since then, I was hooked. But also, my junior high band director, I have to give credit to some of my teachers. Bob Wiss, was a great band director, and he was the one who had the fluidity to actually go from not just being a band director, but taking that year where there was the budget shortfall and going around and teaching music to general music without a classroom to do it. So he had a little cart he built and put a keyboard on it with an amp and had puppets and would, bring in Muppet songs. And it was a really engaging class. The kids loved it. I loved it. It was my favorite music class. But his attitude and support early on, encouraging me to get into solo contests and to start percussion ensembles, hooking me up with really good private teachers. He hooked me up with a teacher at Keith Reichelt, who I still work out of his books, The Art of Rock Drumming, book 1 and 2. His support really helped also not just give me the musical skills and experience that I needed, but also build a lot of confidence in myself. He was great. My high school band director, Ken Snook, he was an incredible teacher as well, very disciplined and goal-oriented. We had an amazing marching band. Competitive Bands of America marching band, won state every year and went to nationals. And he really instilled a team mentality. Besides the discipline and commitment and setting of goals and a clear path on achieving those goals, it didn't matter to him your musical abilities so much as your attitude and that you could be a good team player. He kicked out some people in band who were his star players on flute or trumpet that he really needed in the ensemble. But if they had an attitude problem and were going to bring the team down, it didn't matter. He kicked them out of band. He wanted people there who had the right attitude and who could work together as a team. And for me, that always stuck to what I still do. I'm still part of a team, Wilco, and any other ensemble that I play in. So that was really important for me. And also he really encouraged me as well, hooking me up with 2 amazing private teachers, Mike Scioto and Kevin Lepper. The lessons, musical and otherwise, I learned from them are innumerable. And, I have to give credit also after that, marching in the Cavaliers Drum and Bugle Corps and being exposed to a whole different set of teachers, Brett Kuhn and Dave Dombeck. And then in college, I studied at the University of Kentucky with Jim Campbell. He was a fantastic teacher who's had a huge impact on my life. And some of the other teachers there, Mike Gould, Dan Moore, Randy Sanderbeck, Dale Ashby, even just wonderful teachers and experiences. And then also in college, studying with great teachers in Chicago, Paul Vertico and Bob Rumage and Joel Spencer. So I was just very lucky to get great teachers throughout my life. So those are the 3 lucky accidents that I attribute my formative inspiration and dedication and drive and drumming to. Breaking my leg, a budget for shortfall, and getting some really great teachers. So through those teachers, I was exposed to a lot of different types of music. And in junior high, high school, and college, I tried all kinds of musical situations out. I started getting involved in playing musicals and jazz band and percussion ensemble in junior high. I started my first rock band. I was really into my rock band in high school, and we did all sorts of ensembles as well. That continued in college, just getting involved in anything and everything I could to play and get that experience. So I learned a lot of different musical techniques and concepts and ideas on various percussion instruments, because the percussion family is a huge array of instruments from all over the world. And percussionists and drummers are kind of expected to have a handle on a lot of them. And so those experiences and that exposure really fueled my curiosity and drive and enthusiasm for drumming and for music. Now, it was right after college, I believe, that I really began the practice of asking questions, starting with, what can I do with all of that training that I did in college that was kind of unused now? So by the time I graduated college and moved back to Chicago, I knew at that point I wanted to concentrate on Drumset. I wasn't going to audition for a symphony, wasn't going to try and play in a pit orchestra. I didn't want to, go further education right away and try and get a college job. So I knew I wanted to play drum set. I wanted to play with my rock band. I wanted to play in different settings, play jazz if I could. And I started asking, well, what about all of that time I spent, those hundreds and thousands of hours I spent learning how to play timpani or marimba or jazz vibes or hand drums, all the different areas of percussion. At first I was just like, what a waste. If I had only spent all that practice time on drum set, I'd be so much further than I am right now. But then I looked at it a little differently and I thought, well, why don't I use, and I think this was a credit to Jim Campbell steering me in this direction. Well, why don't you use and incorporate all of that on drum set? Okay, Jim had done a similar thing in teaching marching percussion with the frontline ensemble, making it, instead of someone just playing one instrument, giving these kind of pods and multiple percussion setups for everything. And I took that as an example that maybe I should do that on drum set too, which is nothing new. It was the original conception of the drum set back in the 20s. Big theater kits had all sorts of percussion instruments on them from all over the world, because these drummers were backing up not just other instrumentalists and musicians, but singers, dancers, magicians, comedians, everything. So they were not only playing the drums as a musical instrument, they were also doing Foley work and sound effects. So they had a huge array of instruments on their kits. Now, eventually, the drum set became a lot more standardized for a lot of practical reasons, economic reasons, transportation, and it got a lot smaller, so drummers could travel with it. And so they could fit in small clubs in New York and elsewhere on little stages and play for people. And that's kind of where the kit was that I learned, the drum set. And I thought, like, well, I'm going to start incorporating some pitched percussion on it, and electronic percussion, and homemade percussion, and all sorts of different instruments. But besides just the instruments, also the techniques, the musical concepts and ideas, all those things that I learned, and all those ensembles and groups I played with over the years, and from all those teachers I had, and started doing that on drum set. So that was maybe the first huge question I asked myself. How do I use all that unused training? How do I apply it to something that would be truly useful for me and make the best out of it? Coming up with a multiple percussion kit. Next, at that time when I moved back to Chicago, I was also improvising a lot, doing a lot of free improvisation, where nothing is spoken or talked about. There are no beats, no changes, no ideas. You just set up in a room with some people and start to play and make sound. From that, I started to think, like, what happens if I apply guitar effects pedals to percussion? And that led me to investigate the use of contact mics, little pickups from acoustic guitars. And what if I put those on drum heads? And then I learned how to make my own contact mics from electronic parts, and then running those through guitar pedals, like looping pedals or envelope filters or distortion pedals. And so I could change the sound of the drum and do a lot more with the drums, and also amplify these little sounds. So there wasn't just a loud instrument. I could make very small sounds using extended techniques and have them now amplified so they could compete with the drums and the other instruments. So that was a huge discovery for me by asking that question. What if I apply, what if I do what guitar players and bass players and keyboard players do? I also asked the question early on, can I come up with a compelling set of music on just percussion? And that led me to try to play solo percussion shows. So I started working up different pieces I had in mind, a different rep, and thinking, how can I make a performance that's engaging and it's not just a drum solo, but solo drums, and actually play music to where people will be engaged and listen to it for 45 minutes or an hour. So I started doing that. And through that opened up a lot of doors, a lot of discovery for me as well. It led me to make my first solo records, 3 solo records. And the last of which, well, at that time, is called Mobile. And from that, I decided to write a bunch of compositions for myself in order to play them live. And I multi-tracked and made a record of my own percussion compositions. None Such put that record out, and from there, I started composing. Basically, I'll get back to that in one moment. But one of the pieces on that record was a piece called the Monkey Chant, or Kotche, and all the pieces on that record basically were steeped in that asking of questions. So the Monkey Chant is a Balinese form of performance art, and I had recordings. I love the rhythms of it. I love the hocketing and the energy of it. And I asked myself, I wonder if I can do a solo drum set arrangement of that. And so I developed a prepared snare drum based off the John Cage prepared piano, and using contact mics and a lot of different effects and homemade amplified instruments on my drum set, I came up with an arrangement that followed the narrative of the Kotche, from a portion of the Ramayana, Hindu epic story. That was one piece. I also was really inspired by the mobile sculpture of Alexander Calder. And I was wondering once when I was looking at one, I wonder if I can do that on percussion as well. These parts that are beautiful on their own, but also constantly in flux and in motion. And the artwork is always changing because of that. And that led me to come up with the piece Mobile that's on that record as well. I also was loving the painting of Gerhard Richter and I wonder with his different smearing techniques, scraping techniques, and all these thick layers of paint, I wonder if that's something I could replicate on percussion. And so I came up with a piece or two based on that, slowing layers of percussion vastly down, creating a beat, and then replacing the sounds of the drum kit with drones based on those sounds and overlapping, and just basically coming up with pieces that way. Another one was, can I make a vibraphone solo out of some improvised kalimba playing from these African recordings, that field recordings that I had. That was another one of the pieces. So all of these pieces on Mobile basically came about from asking questions. At the same time, I started my longtime duo with the great Darren Gray, a bass player, St. Louis based, called On Fillmore. We were asking questions. Can we have a band without a vocalist or a lead instrument? We're a drummer and a bass player. Can we do this? Can we pull it off? So he's always been a true comrade in that pursuit of asking questions as well. So all of those pieces, as I said, were on that record Mobile. It came out on None Such. And then from there, a lot of the other artists on None Such heard it. And that led to a lot of other opportunities for me. I think there might be a question.
You have a question?
I'm going to pause because I am supposed to be taking questions here throughout. So yes, please.
Sure. We have John Hearns from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, asking, as a composer, I feel like I get stuck saying the same thing over and over. Have you experienced this, and how did you get out of that mess?
Great question. Well, yes, and I was actually just about to talk about that, but asking questions is how I did it, because it's very easy, especially if you have a piece that is a success, or that you hit on something that you feel is original and you're finding your own voice. It's really easy to kind of keep doing that over and over. That's for any creative person, I think. That's one of the things I love about Wilco is we never make the same record twice in a row. We're always searching for new directions. Same thing with On Fillmore. So as a composer, I try that same thing. And some examples would be, well, first of all, when I put that record out, other artists on None Such started hearing it, and then I started getting asked to write pieces for people. So the first was Kronos Quartet, and then Bang on a Can Ensemble, Soul Percussion, Silk Road Ensemble, a lot of different types of pieces. In all of those, I wasn't trained as a composer. I just made that drum record for myself, so I had material to play at solo shows, and I just wasn't trained. I didn't identify as a composer. I had classes in college like orchestration and counterpoint theory, so I knew enough of the mechanics. But I just thought like, okay, can I write a string quartet? When Kronos was the first to commission, and I thought, sure, let's figure out how to do it. And for that piece, at least, I just came up with it as it's a quartet. My body is a quartet on the drums, two arms, two legs. So I basically wrote a drum set piece, and then orchestrated it out and embellished it to be this 25-minute piece for string quartet and drum set. Now, a lot of to answer John's question, a lot of my pieces originate on drum set, but I'm always trying to come at it from a different angle. Um, for instance, Something of Life is a piece I wrote, a cello solo I wrote for Jeff Ziegler. That one I wrote off the idea of a storyboard, how people write sitcoms or TV shows, and just having these different scenes, and arranging them in a way that resonated with me. Um, Other ones I mentioned, other pieces were steeped in inspiration from a visual artist, or asking how can I do that. A piece called Immortal Flux that I did for Mass Mocha was based on just the history of Mass Mocha and what that factory had been in previous iterations. Um, Mille et Trois, the piece I wrote for Silk Road Ensemble, I came at that from more of a numerology almost aspect of taking three numbers, 21, 22, and 23, and working with those in different combinations and in different rhythmic cells to come up with the piece. Um, my current drum beat project was all originated by being into the writings of Karl Ove Knausgaard, the Norwegian author. So I guess I'm just always trying to find a different starting point, a different seed for all these pieces, and inevitably that gets me thinking a little bit differently to approach the piece in a new way for me. And then you always, as a composer, you already know this, I'm sure, that the piece always kind of dictates where it wants to go, no matter how watertight your concept of it might be. Once you get working on it, a lot of ideas and possibilities present themselves if you make yourself open and aware of that. Another question?
Okay, this is from Julie. Julie here. Glenn, I love how you mentioned all the unused training and how you could use it. I think that this is a huge concern with students as they dive into a university music education today. It leads me to ask, what are the challenges for an independent musician trying to earn a living, but also raising a family and have health insurance all the while with a career as a performing musician? Everyone is not married to a professor of bioengineering at a major university.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot to tackle. I don't really know. Can I see the question again? Um, Trying to make a living in I mean, it's like, I suppose it's no different for a musician than any other job. I mean, it's a balancing act. It's always a balancing act. It's learning how to manage your time, learning how to say no sometimes. Um, I am very lucky that I have a successful wife that I can lean on in lean times like now. But it's always just trying to do the right thing for those who rely on you and that you support, and you're invested in them and those relationships long term, and just making sure that career aspirations always kind of take a back seat to that. At least that's always been my approach. I know that these relationships are they're the meat of life. They're what really give you inspiration and ultimately happiness. And although I get that from my professional career as well, it is a balancing act, and you have to learn how to do both. And sometimes it's not easy. And for me, I mean, that kind of plays directly into what I'm talking about here too, because a lot of opportunities have presented themselves to me over the years, because of the asking of questions. Um, a lot of things have revealed themselves as maybe another possibility for income. I've uh, kind of had multiple careers within a career. The whole composing thing has been a great boost to me, professionally, artistically, but even financially too. And I never had planned on that. Or if the opportunity for doing a commercial comes up, or scoring something, a lot of the different collaborations I've done, they've almost more presented themselves, and I've taken advantage of them. So it's kind of hard to always plan for that stuff. I guess it's more important to be open minded and be open to taking on new experiences. I even ended up teaching a class at University of Chicago. I never anticipated that. There's a lot of different things I've done over the last 10 or 15 years that I never thought I would do. And they've opened up a lot of doors and also made me a lot more professionally resilient. Okay, another question, I think.
Do you want to take a few more questions?
Yeah, let me take another question.
There's a few of them. There's a follow-up from John. He asks, how do you find that creative spark that helps take your work in other directions?
How do I find that creative spark? Well, I mean, besides continually doing what I keep repeating over and over, asking questions, and seeing things that I find inspiring in other mediums, whether it be film or literature or music or even, sports or food or cooking or anything, and trying to think like, wow, that really excites me, that resonates with me. How would I do that? Um, uh, I think also an important thing is to be in the practice of being creative. So one word you said that kind of stuck with me was spark. And you can't wait for that spark. In my experience, at least, you can't wait for that epiphany and that magical moment of, aha, this is the piece I'm going to write. This is how it's going to go, or I know exactly what to do now. If you wait for those moments, I think they don't come often enough for most people. You're wasting your time. And in my experience, the most successful people I know are people who just do it every day. You get in the practice of being a creative person, and then you don't even have to think about it. Just by going every day and working a little bit at what you do, at being creative, you realize after time that it's no longer searching and grappling for good ideas or trying to find inspiration. You realize it's just like turning on a faucet. The ideas are there. There's too many ideas to pursue. You have to start filtering them out. And I know this isn't just me. This is the way Jim O'Rourke works. This is the way Jeff Tweedy works, and Darren Gray, and all my musical cohorts. But also, I've even read about visual artists and sculptors and filmmakers, and they kind of all say the same thing, very similar. Most of them say the same thing. Just do it every day. Treat it like it's a part of your life, a discipline. It's work. It's something you do every day. It's part of who you are. And I think the inspiration and the sparks follow. Yes.
This is a fun question from Diane Kairos. She says, Monkey Chant is amazing live. I assume those crickets aren't real in the boxes?
I get asked that a lot. No, they're not real. I wish they were, because most of those cricket boxes don't work for me anymore. They were just little, just kind of gimmicky little toys that I used to get in various Chinatowns around the U.S. and other countries. And there was about a 3 or 4 year period there where they were everywhere. And I just loved walking past them and hearing like, a few of them opened the different rhythms they would make together, because depending on the life of the battery cell that's in there, they're light activated, but it's a photoelectric cell. They would make these different rhythms that would go in and out of phase, and I just love that. And so when it came to creating the Monkey Chant, on most of the recordings I had were, they're made live in Bali, and you can hear the insect noises all in the forests in the background. And so for me, it was like, ooh, I can use these boxes that I've been collecting because I love the rhythms of them. And also I know that from having to feed a fire-bellied toad live crickets every day, they don't chirp on command. So yeah, There's no way. By the way, that toad was bought when I was on tour, not my idea. Yeah, so yeah, they're fake.
Diane has a couple more questions.
Okay.
Do you have any collaborations coming up with Darren or Jim O'Rourke?
Okay, do I have any collaborations coming up with Darren or Jim? Yes, Darren and I are, maybe 3/4 of the way through making our newest record, and I'm really excited about it. It's horrifying acoustic doom music. It's wonderful. It's something neither of us know what it is and how we did it. It was certainly accidental, but it's exciting. So yes, Darren and I have new music that's coming out, and we also recently discovered, through the graciousness of our longtime engineer Pat Burns, hard drives filled with unreleased tracks that I forgot about. Pieces we did for this compilation or that compilation or this soundtrack or for that demo or reel or whatever. So there's a glut of unreleased on film music that will be coming out on Bandcamp soon as well. And with Jim lives in Japan. I don't get to see him very often, unfortunately. If you're wanting new music from Jim, oh my gosh, he's been putting out for the last few years at least 2 to 6 recordings a year on Bandcamp under the name Steam Room, one word. I think he's at 47 now, and they're all different and great and amazing. And there is some loose fur stuff that no one's heard that is not done, so I hope someday we will dust that off and finish that and bring that band back to life. We'll see. Okay, so basically, where did I leave off? I can take some more questions, but I think I, just left off through my composing career, how asking questions has fueled most of my pieces. Not only throughout composing, though, but also, when opportunities present themselves, and I ask myself, what if? So one I mentioned was that Delta faucet commercial I did a few years ago. And that wasn't actually me asking a question. That was my good friend, Gabe McDonough, asking, hey, can you make music out of water? Can you use water as a drumstick almost? And I was like, sure. And I sent him a video of John Cage doing the same thing in the 40s. And so he got the idea that, I wonder if we could play these faucets like an instrument. And that's how that came about. Because Wilco does our festival every other year, Solid Sound, at Mass MoCA, the incredible art museum in North Adams, Massachusetts. There's an opportunity for the band members to showcase our side projects, other things we do. And so I use that as an opportunity to start creating sound installations, which is something I love doing now as well. Also, I've had for a long time, I've loved the medium of dance. Thanks to Mitty, she brought me to some dance performances early on, and I always thought that would be so great. It's so rhythmic and percussive. I used to play for some dance classes in college, and it just makes so much sense. It's rhythm, it's motion, it's music. That's what I do on Drumset. It's motion and rhythm. And so when the opportunity came up to work with Daniela Gami and her dance company 8-9, I jumped at the opportunity, and we came up with an hour-long piece called Calling Glen, where I'm the only performer, the only musician on stage, with 8 to 12 world-class dancers in front of me. That's been really gratifying. So I love taking percussion out of traditional contexts and trying them out by asking, what if it's in this other thing? Some other examples really quick. I did a collaboration with the chef Rick Bayless a few years ago, where I was playing music that was being triggered in real time by the sounds of a dinner being prepared from lapel mics and contact mics and cutting boards. It would trigger certain sounds from the regions of that the dishes that were being prepared originated in. And then I played a set of music to go along with that as well. Another example would be the incredible podcast and show Radio Lab. Darren and I got asked years ago from Jad and Robert to provide the music for their live show and the Foley work, the sound effects too. So that was a really cool opportunity for me to explore live kind of Foley work. And then also through my collaboration with Danielle Agami, I was able to do a theater piece, which was again an idea like, I don't know if this will work or not, but how will we ever know unless we ask the question and try it? And that was with a dancer, her dancing, percussionist, me, and an actor. And John Hamm did the role for a piece called Fishing. And we did a few performances of that. Hopefully, there'll be some more coming up. Mass Mocha when they open up again. And that was a really, gratifying experience as well. Taking percussion into these non-traditional roles for me has always been a lot of fun. And just jumping off to see if I could do it. Okay, I'll pause for a question.
Okay, Jonathan Franco asks, hey Glenn, thanks for doing this. How would you describe your approach to combining what might initially be a somewhat straightforward song structure with experimental textures and techniques? Songs like I'm Trying to Break Your Heart and Poor Places seem to be the perfect combination of melodic and dissonant elements without one overbearing the other. How much editing do you find that you do after the fact to achieve that balance? Thank you.
Ooh, good question. So those particular tunes, well, I guess just in Wilco in general, I just try and be me, which means approaching the drum set maybe not as a traditional time keeping instrument all the time that is just going to play the straight ahead beat for the song. I was asked to be in the band by Jeff and and John early on because of who I was and what I could bring to the band. So I've always felt like, okay, it's kind of my obligation to be me and to bring that kind of multiple percussion approach to drum set to the band. And like I said, it's not just about incorporating different instruments on the kit, but different concepts and ideas as well. So there are things like on those tunes where I don't play time necessarily. Things I learned from, playing in orchestra or playing for an opera or a musical where it's not always about time. Sometimes you just wait and for the right moment, and then you play the triangle part or the cymbal crash, or you're adding texture and you're adding color instead of rhythm. So I've always tried to do that with Wilco as well. But I always say, and it's the truth is, in that band, the music is a vehicle most of the time for Jeff Tweedy's lyrics. So my primary job is to help illustrate those lyrics in the best I can. And for me, oftentimes, that means instead of just staying out of the way and doing the most basic, simple thing, a lot of times it means doing something unexpected, coming up with a beat that might have a weird bend to it. So the music will bend in a different way and maybe perk up the listener's ear a little bit more and pay attention to the lyrics a little bit more and what Jeff's saying, or help frame what he's saying a little differently than people are used to. So I just feel like that whole approach, those two songs that you brought up, are based in who I am, but also trying to frame and illustrate the lyrics the best I can, and also just create a compelling piece of music. So oftentimes, I remember with Poor Places that you brought up, Jim O'Rourke mixing that in the studio and thinking about different scene changes, or I'm Trying to Break Your Heart, and different scene changes throughout the song. So instead of just being, here's the song, it's got these 2 parts or these 3 parts, more like, no, here's this moment, and this moment, this event is happening for 20 seconds, and then it's moving to this next event. Thinking more as a filmmaker might, and how, you don't have the same lighting, you don't have the same actors in every scene, you don't have the same scenery, all of that changes. And so even though it's you have the common thread of a storyline going through a film. So I think that's just one example of just trying to approach things in different ways and asking questions like that. Like, what if we approach it this way? What if we try that? So I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Another one?
Sure. Kat Sam from West Tennessee asks, how has COVID-19 pandemic affected your professional life? Have you started new projects or gone back to old ones?
Okay, how has COVID affected my professional life? Well, it's pulled the rug from underneath it, basically. Um, Wilco was 3 days into a month-long tour when we had to turn back and come back home. So we couldn't finish supporting our new record, Ode to Joy, on our West Coast tour. And more than that, there's another East Coast tour that was canceled, a European tour. I had solo performances this summer in Finland that have been canceled. So, all in all, upwards of 30 shows canceled for me. That is my primary source of income is live performance. So that's been a big adjustment too, having to recalculate finances. But creatively, I have, of course, everyone. A lot of people I know, at least, are really dealing with this in a pretty inspirational and tremendous way, trying to make the best out of an awful, awful situation that's hurting and killing a lot of people, and coming up with great ideas and ways to share their artistry and what they do, and hopefully, enlighten people, make their days a little bit easier. This whole Keeping the Beat series is one small example of that. There's a lot of different examples. I've been wanting to use this time as a kind of a gift of practice time. And now I've got all this time. We'll finish the Anfilmo record. I'll do this. I'll do this. In reality, it's been a lot of homeschooling. My wife is a professor. My kids are at home, and they're that magical age where, they get a lot of schoolwork, but they still need a bit of oversight. There's a lot of moving parts. So Mitty and I together have been trying to tackle that, but that's been really consuming most of my time. And I know that'll get a little bit easier once we, get in the groove of it all. If we do, maybe we won't. But and when summer approaches, I'll probably get some more creative time. But also, I'm carving out a little time in the morning, evenings to now that this has been going on for a little bit, I know it's going to, at least in Illinois, continue for another month or so, the stay-at-home orders. So I'm just trying to make the best of it and stay positive and be a good dad, be a good husband, first and foremost. And then on top of that, trying to explore some new ideas that I have musically. So I hope that answers your question.
Do you want to keep going with some questions, or you?
Yeah, we can keep going.
Okay. Jennifer Eileen says, I saw Calling Glen in Los Angeles, and it was truly an inspirational experience. Do you get nervous or have stage fright when you're doing something like this? Can you talk about how it felt to have that interactive experience with the dancers? It was really beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that was nerve-wracking. And I've said this many times. I typically don't get too nervous with Wilco. It doesn't really matter the situation, but with Wilco, I know there's such a built-in trust amongst the musicians, and we have so much experience under our belts. This lineup's been intact for 14 or 15 years. I've been in the band, coming up on 20 years, so we've been through a lot of situations. We've been, in situations when the power goes out or something breaks and this goes down. And I think I know we can always land on our feet. So with Wilco, I never get nervous. When I do solo shows, I sometimes get nervous. With Calling Glen that you mentioned, yes, I was mortified going on stage. Part of the reason was because this was a new thing for me. Another reason would be Danielle Gami, the choreographer, and it's her dance company. She is extremely driven and exacting in her vision, and oftentimes she's really good at reading situations and finding out that's not right. And so a lot of times there's changes at the 11th hour. Literally an hour before a show, sometimes there's major changes, which is how the dance world operates, it's not always that way in the music world. So yeah, that combined with me being the only musician on stage, I had to make sure I had backups. You know, what happens if my SPD sampler goes down? What happens if this goes down or this goes down? So I had to have a lot of backup contingencies, and I had to prepare for the worst ahead of time if it did happen. Luckily, it didn't. But I always kind of have that backup plan for solo shows. Anytime I'm the only person on stage, I try and have a lot of redundancy, or at least an idea of where something could go if everything goes wrong. And the interaction with the dancers was, yeah, really, really cool and special too, because you know that's something I hadn't experienced before. Um, a lot of times when I'm on stage, I do interact with my bandmates and the other performers, of course, but interacting with someone who's doing something completely different is always interesting. And and they're being pushed. Those dancers are being pushed to the the extent of their abilities as humans, as what physically can be done, and so that is always inspiring for me as well, seeing what they're able to do and how the extremes they're going to, and that drives me as well. That inspires me to push harder and to go further, and that kind of interaction is pretty powerful as well.
I'm going to combine a couple of questions that are asking
Okay,
related things.
got
So,
some question splicing.
yeah, Beth Saladino and Joanne Hackett ask, or say first, you sound so naturally curious, and they're wondering, have you explored other mediums such as painting, drawing, sculpture, cooking to express your vision and inspiration? That's Beth's question. And then Joanne Hackett asks, do you play other musical instruments? And if you do, how does that change your approach to composing and performing?
Okay, I wish I could give you all sorts of examples, but not really. So other creative outlets, like I build my own instruments. To me, that's a bit of um, dabbling in art. A lot of I customize or build a lot of implements and little noisemakers and instruments that I make. For me, that's kind of um, another aspect of drumming, though. I do love cooking. I love doing a lot of other activities. As far as instruments, I took piano in college and I do play pitched percussion, vibraphone, marimba, things like that. But I have hesitated, uh, and I don't think it's a good thing, and I wouldn't recommend it. And I always tell when I'm doing a residency or teaching, I give the opposite advice. I think if you do know how to play some chords on guitar or a bass line or some piano music, you're going to be a better musician and a better drummer for it. All these experiences cross pollinate and influence you. However, I've always wanted, there's so much on percussion and drum set that I want to do, that I've always kind of had this laser like focus on drum set. And instead of spending that time learning guitar chords, which would probably greatly benefit me, I will instead spend that time learning or honing in on some aspect of drumming that I've never touched on before, or some idea I had that will help me grow in drums and percussion and a little more focused with my goals that I've set for myself. Which, not to go off on a tangent here, but a lot of times the way I work is a bit backwards. So instead of doing more of the traditional things, for a lot of drummers who have gone to school for drumming, we work out of a lot of books, learn a lot of different concepts and ideas from books, and then that seeps into your playing, and then it comes out in your playing. Well, I've kind of most of the time work backwards from that. Whereas I get an idea for a piece and I build a structure for a piece, an idea, oftentimes things that I can't play and I can't do. And that forces me then to go back and learn how to do it, whether it's an independence thing, playing an ostinato with one hand and a melody with another, or certain technical things, musical ideas. A lot of times I'll have the ideas and I'll want to realize them in a sound way, and that'll force me to go back and practice and learn how to do X, Y, and Z, so I can fulfill that goal of being able to present and play this piece. So I think I have so much focus on areas like that that I kind of become a one-trick pony, and yeah, it's mostly drums and percussion for me. Okay. Um, any other questions?
There's a handful of them. You wanna
Okay,
keep
I'll try
going?
and answer as many as we can.
Well, Dave Ratliff has a question for
Dave
you.
Ratliff
He
went
says
to college with him.
if you had to boil all your musical influences down to just one musician, who would that be?
Well, that's really tough. But I would have to say I would have to probably. Ooh, I guess I'd have to go back to Jim O'Rourke, because not only did he turn me on to so many different types of music, um, just interesting rock, classical, improvised, noise, but he also is the person who I met Darren Gray from, and Tim Barnes, but Jeff Tweedy. Jim's responsible for basically introducing me to Jeff and getting me in Wilco, and from there Nels and John and Pat and Michael and Leroy and all of the people that I've collaborated and been able to. I can kind of trace it back to Jim, um, and I've had so many musical inspirations in my life and artistic inspirations. Um, it's tough because I've even said it. Um, Plenty of times that even bad musicians inspire me. Bad drummers inspire me sometimes because they do stuff that's so often weird and wrong that it makes me get out of my way of thinking and like, oh wait, but there could be something to that. That could be interesting if I did it a little bit differently and applied it to what I do. That could really be something cool. So anyway, I'm influenced by almost everyone I hear or see, and even people who have nothing to do with music. My wife is one of my greatest influences, artistically as well. But I'm not just saying that because she's so wonderful. My kids, of course, my parents, everyone. But yeah, musically, it would, in art, artistically, it would have to be Jim O'Rourke, I guess. Thanks, Dave. Hope you're doing well.
There's another question about Wilco, but I'll just do a little shout out. Ed Sargent has a shout out to he's a proud UTM music department percussion studio alum. And he says, thanks, Glenn. Love the band and love your playing.
Thank you.
And Julie adds, I won't say this, but managed Maynard Ferguson for decades until his death and is now with Joan Jett and the Blackhearts.
Oh, wow.
And Julie said he is a best friend and super sweet to support these shows each night. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Diane has a question, another question. She asks, can you tell us about your time away from Wilco during the hiatus? Did you find it refreshing to take a break?
Yeah, so it's Diane, right? Yeah, so Diane's referring to a couple years ago. MIDI received a Fulbright grant to do research, biomedical engineering research in Finland. And it was for the better part of the year. So the whole family, me and our two children, picked up and moved to Finland for the year. Now, since we don't have a support system there, all of our families, siblings, in-laws and parents are here in the Chicago area for the most part. We were kind of on our own. So I was basically going to have to be stay-at-home dad because Mitty was traveling all over Finland weekly or all over Europe for different conferences and presentations. So it was her chance to kind of tour and my chance to stay home with the kids. Luckily, I'm in, an incredible band, and they were all gracious enough to let me have that time off and not fire me or replace me, and instead work on their innumerable side projects and other artistic pursuits. So that time was a time of solitude for me. We were not living in Helsinki, but just outside in Espoo, and it was kind of a paradise for me. Aside from my love for that country and culture, uh, having that downtime, it was almost like some sort of sabbatical for me. I was taking care of the kids, but Sonar delivered a kit, so I was able to practice for the first time in years. And when I say that, I make a differentiation between practice and preparation. So, of course, I played a lot in the years previous to that, but it was oftentimes, preparation for, oh my God, I'm playing with this group in New York in a week and I have to learn this music, or I'm playing, oh, next month this is coming up and I have to learn all this music and all these, so it was a lot of preparation always. What's next? As opposed to free play. practicing for just the love of playing the instrument. And I just talked about this in the story I did for Modern Drummer last month. And I just took the approach of, what happens if I never perform another note of music? If I never play with another musician, if I never record another note of music, if no one ever hears me play the drums again, would I still play? Yes, I love playing. I love those internal puzzles, unlocking all that stuff, like I mentioned earlier. I just got tremendous joy from playing the drums, and I thought, yes, I would. And what would I work on? What would I practice? It wouldn't be time. I don't need to play good time. It wouldn't be technique necessarily. I have a lot of technique already, and I don't need to impress anyone. No need to work on chops or fills or anything like that. So I was like, I just love playing beats, and I really got into just composing and practicing beats, coming up with original takes for me, exploring different techniques. And so that was a big part of that. That launched my current solo project, but also just getting that downtime, not having a car, riding buses, getting to read a lot, being in nature. It was a magical time for me. And you know what? I've been reminded of it a lot since the stay-at-home order. It's been a small lining in this awful sequence of events happening in the world right now. But it has been great to have that time with the family again, and having that downtime, and not being able to go out, not being able to go places or travel or tour. It's reminded me a lot of Finland, and it's been a nice break, because you need to have those periods of downtime in order to get inspiration. If you're always going, I think you don't process enough of what's happening to operate at your full potential. So I think those ebbs and flows creatively and professionally, your workload, are really important. And that was my biggest takeaway from that, besides seeing dozens of unbelievably incredible drummers and musicians in Finland. And yeah, getting to travel and just creating a lot of great memories with my family as well. Okay, so I will are there any other questions?
There's a handful more.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but I'll try and answer a few more questions. Okay.
Drew Davidson says, hey, it's Drew from Memphis. Wilco's my favorite band, and this is just wonderful. And my question is, outside of music, what are some of your favorite hobbies or interests? And how do these things impact your music making?
Good question. So I already mentioned one of them. One of my hobbies on tour, if you can call it a hobby, is going to art museums, contemporary art museums, modern art museums, and just walking around and being, a lot of times something, may not find much inspiration, but sometimes I'll see that one work that'll just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I'll just be like, wow, people have been painting for 600 however many, for millennia, and this person came up with a brand new idea on how to approach it. Like, how can I do that to what I do? My instrument's only 100 years old. Like, how can I further and dig deeper in my instrument the way that person did with that artwork? That's one. Hiking. I love hiking. Love hiking in the woods. And I always get ideas. I hike with a pen and a notepad all the time, because I'm always stopping. I'm having to catch back up with Timidity and the kids, because I'm stopping to write down an idea, or so I get a lot of ideas from those two. Those are my favorite hobbies, I guess, would be hiking and going to art museums. Thanks.
Kirk Hudson asks, can you talk about your project with John Hamm?
Yeah, so that's the piece Fishing that I mentioned earlier. And that was written by, conceived of by Danielle Agami, the choreographer that I work with a lot. And she just had the what if idea, everything I'm talking about here. What if there was a piece with 3 different artists from different disciplines, and they interacted? Would it work? Could it work? And so John has been a long-time supporter of Wilco, a fan of the band, a friend of the band. So I knew him. Danielle had also met him before that. And then I think it was a show in LA that the idea kind of all came together for, oh yeah, this would be the right combination. Danielle, me, and John. Let's see if we can make it work. And we did. And it's I was really pleased with the piece and loved it. I was able to incorporate some things I'd never done before, using sensory percussion by Sunhouse, incorporating that into my playing so I could really expand the drum set to any sound besides just drum sounds, but playing it as a drummer would. So yeah, hopefully there'll be more performances coming up. Everything's a little unknown right now, so fingers crossed, but thanks for your question.
So it turns out there's almost 400 live views right now, and that Julie says that's a new record, so that's cool.
Thank you.
Joshua Smith asks, what kind of performance or compositional trends do you see on the drumming horizon?
I don't know. I always think I'm kind of like a dinosaur in it now. There's so many young guys doing incredible stuff. I wonder if this is Joshua Smith that I also went to college with. If it is, hello. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I think like I mentioned, the use of technologies like sensory percussion or different triggers, things like that, incorporating electronics. When I started doing it, it was more electroacoustics, contact mics, physical things, and melodic percussion. But now it's all over the place. So I don't exactly know where it's going. People like Ian Chang, the drummer, he's really opening up a lot of doors. There's a record put out last week by a percussionist, Evan Chapman, that is all kind of electronic drum compositions. He commissioned a bunch of composers. That to me is really exciting and innovative. For me personally, it deals, the future for me at least, is as a solo artist would be more treating the drum set as a command and control center. So making it more of the hub, the cockpit of a audio visual performance. So using sensory percussion and other technologies, to be able to present an entire live multimedia show. So I bet that's one aspect, but again, there are so many unbelievably, incredibly talented players out there. Every time I go to Instagram, my jaw's on the floor. I'm just like, wow. And every time I discover something new for myself, I realize, I'm barely scratching the surface. There's so much yet to learn, so much out there. So I don't want to make any predictions because I think the only limitations are people's imaginations. So hopefully it'll go in a lot of different amazing directions that I couldn't even possibly comprehend at this point. We'll see.
Without thinking quick, wood or metal?
Wood.
Why?
Why wood? Because I have a lot of metal percussion, and I know a lot of people doing some pretty amazing things with metal percussion. Morph Beats comes to mind right now, and part of the reason I even got involved with Jimmer Work in the first place is I was playing a live tour with Edith Frost. I was her drummer, and I just had a little floor tom cocktail kit, pedal underneath, and a snare drum, a two-piece kit. But in front of it, I had a metal sculpture that I built with a sculptor in Kentucky when I was still in school. Gordon Gildersleeve, I believe, was his name. And it was a super cool metal sculpture that I could play, but I could also hang percussion on, and I love that. And so since then, I've had other people give me metal sculptures, and I've always collected loads of junk metal and beautiful sounding metal, anywhere I travel. So I have a lot of metal percussion. Wood to me is a little more tricky to work with. There are some great companies. There's one in London right now. The name's escaping me, but they're doing incredible stuff. Of course, Meinl as well. But yeah, wood percussion. Okay, so thank you. I just want to really thank Julie Hill, who contacted me about this. She's an incredible person and percussionist and leader in our percussion community and in music education. And And yeah, when she asks, you say yes. Julie's incredible. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Alexis, for helping hook this all up.
Oh my gosh.
And I just want to remind everyone to tune in weekdays, Monday through Thursday at 7 p.m. Central Time to watch Keeping the Beat live. And remember to tell your friends about our program. I'm not exactly sure who's coming up next, but I saw two really great episodes this week with John Whitman and Victor Wooten and Jeff Coffin. Really great stuff. Learned a lot from those. Yeah, John's a sage. Anyway, so we want to thank you very much, and any presenters who wish to apply to host one of these episodes can send applications via tnmea.org. And I just want to thank you all for watching and taking the time out of your day and for all the great questions. Really appreciate it.